Today, I wanted to discuss about one of the biggest elephants in the room in organization, and it's about the effectiveness of managers. Look at the numbers. So there is some research that shows that 22% of employees strongly agree that the leadership has a clear direction for the organization. 15% of employees strongly agree the leadership makes them enthusiastic about the future. Only 13% strongly agree the leadership communicates effectively with the rest of the organization. So the big question here is, are managers really needed, or should we tweak or revise their job description? My guest today is Jack Skeels. And what I found quite interesting is that very recently he has written a book called the Unmanaged, Master the Magic of Creating Empowered and Happy Organizations. And it was quite inspired. Oh, that's the one, indeed, indeed. And I was very inspired because the guy, Jack Skeels, is a two-time Inc. 500 award-winning executive. He has been working with Rand as a senior analyst. He's the founder and CEO of an agency, of a company called AgencyAgile. And what is interesting is that this company is helping agencies kind of quiet this type of crazy mess that there is in creative agencies with multiple projects, and kind of guide them towards restoring productivity, profitability, and of course, what makes creativity fun. They do it using their proprietary culture-based team empowerment model and using the agile methodology. And we are going to be discussing today about that simple question that a lot of people is asking. Are managers really needed? Jack, welcome to the Growth Hacking Culture Podcast. Thank you very much for making it today.
Oh, Ivan, thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to this conversation too, because it's a great topic,
And what I have noticed is that in your book, this topic has been expanded with a lot of research. I'm not sure how long time it has taken you to gather this information in your book. By the way, so how long time did it take you to write the book?
Oh, that's an embarrassing question. So and I mention it partly in the book is that I decided that people weren't managing right, and that was in 2010. 2010. Yeah, that people weren't managing right. And I was going to write a book about it, and I wrote the book. I mean, I wrote the outline and I did all the research, and then I realized that I had been a pretty bad manager as well. I mean, I was writing it to prove that I'd been a good manager. I thought, wow, I can't write a book about something I've never done. I mean, that feels so inauthentic and the like. And so what followed was the last 13 years of AgencyAgile, 200 clients. And we're basically going and solve this $1 million problem, which is how do we get the managers out of the way of the team, right? And make things run better. And then just, I think, literally probably 2 years ago, I said, okay, now it's time. And it's hard. It's hard to write a book, but it took quite a while. So
Jack, I completely agree. It is really hard. So don't be harsh on yourself, because I had the time. So because I got my free copy, thank you, Jack. I had the time to read through through the book, and there is a wealth of combination of information that, in fact, despite the fact that I have been working in corporate, I didn't know. So it seems that you have spent quite a lot of time not only to write it, but even to refresh some of the data. Even if you started in 2000 and something, you have refreshed the data. And this is the moment where I would like to ask you the core of my question, which is that, so we know that businesses are moving faster, there is technology, there is remote work, there is the work culture crisis where nobody feels engaged with their managers. Is there a place for a manager whose job is to manage?
well, yeah. So I'm glad we have a lot of time on this podcast, okay? Because one of the things one must ask first in that whole thing is, what do we mean by manage?
Indeed.
And because I'll tell you, the word, the label manager gets overused and the like, and I'll explain that more in a minute. But I want to just rewind a little bit. The idea of manager is actually an industrial revolution thing, and though that predates all of us, it's only about 100 years old, right? Maybe 120 years old. Before that point, before the turn of the previous century, 1900 or so, before that point, the word manage was used, but it meant to tend to livestock. Okay.
Mm.
So it meant like a shepherd, right? You know, I'm gonna take care of my animals, right? And so in that, yeah, no, yeah, whatever you have to do, depending on your attitude about the animals, right? Are they cooperative or non-cooperative? And the man who invented what we think of as managing, Friedrich Taylor, actually believed that some workers needed to be treated like oxen, you know, like you said, smacking them and moving them along. And so this idea that workers would not do anything unless they were coaxed, if you will. He used a phrase, it was manager's job is to enforce the cooperation. Now, enforce the cooperation doesn't really sound all that friendly, right? That's like, that's what the police do when they're moving people out of the street, right? They're enforcing cooperation. And so I think that's, in a way, the way we think about managing is really tainted by, in fact, its early days and the idea that managers are the ones who know better, right? And managers should be directing everyone. Fast forward to today, and by the way, you didn't need to go all that far forward in the future. By 1950 or so, it had been proven that that wasn't true, that actually things happen better inside the organization when everyone's helping to make decisions and the like. And it's not about managerial superiority, it's about managerial enablement, right? And that was the 1950s, 1960s is where the idea that maybe managers should be empowering. You know, that's where all those ideas came up. They become very popular in the 90s and the like. But something funny happened during that whole time period, which is workers today are incredibly intelligent. And even I, 40 years ago, when I came out of college with a very high-end computer science and factory automation degree, when I got hired in as junior dude, whatever I was, programmer, basically, when I got hired in, I knew more about what we were doing than any of my managers did, than any project manager did, right? And so what were they going to manage, right? I mean, there's just, and that's what the world is starting to look like now. You want to be good at something, you use YouTube and TikTok and go read stuff on the internet. You don't need to learn from a manager, kind of thing. So a lot of these things that used to be fundaments of why managers exist, like people who don't know what to do or people who aren't able to think about these topics or whatever, all that stuff's gone now. Okay. So your question's very relevant. Is it where to now, managers, right? Why do we need you and the like, right?
And going back to the initial numbers I was mentioning, so the initial numbers are saying managers suck at communicating. So they suck at motivating people. They are not good with the clear direction of directions of the organization. And indeed, so what are they good for is the big question. So according to you,
I'll answer that. I didn't mean to duck it. I wanted to give you a moment to jump, to just because I talked for a little while there. I think that one of the big things is if we think of what a manager is, and I want to keep on defining this a little bit, and then I'll come to that answer. The idea of manager is the hierarchical, what they call the vertical manager. That's the classic manager. I'm in a department of specialists of some sort, and my manager used to be a specialist, but he or she became the best specialist, right? And got promoted to manager, which, by the way, is a mistake. Okay. First of all, being a really good has nothing to do with becoming a great manager. And there's a whole body of research that actually suggests, the findings suggest that the department becomes weaker when we promote the specialist manager, and actually motivation goes down because those new managers usually micromanage. All they know how to do is focus on the work. So they're a manager and they're trying to focus on the work, which is not their job anymore, right? And so that's that's the dilemma of the sort of new department manager these days is congratulations. You don't get to do what you used to do, which was fun and rewarding. Instead, you have to do this job that you know nothing about, and your all of your inclinations will be wrong, basically, right? You should be doing the opposite. The other thing that's really important to point out is in about 1970 or so, a little bit earlier, but this idea became popular in management sciences, which is of a matrix organization. And
Mhm.
what that said all of a sudden was, well, you don't have one manager, you have two, at least, right? So in a matrix organization, I may be on three projects. I have my department manager, but I have a manager for each of those projects. So now I have four managers. Okay.
Mhm.
And the early adopters of this, one of them was Ken Olson, who had a Digital Equipment Corporation, the CEO. I used to work there actually. But Ken Olson, after doing it for 2 years, said, it's killing our innovation and our productivity. We're getting rid of matrix management. It's too many managers. So he was an in the weeds guy, and he could see that happening. But somehow no one else got that memo. And today, organizations are filled with both vertical managers, which are needed. I'll talk about that in a minute, but tons of what we call quasi managers. Is they're sort of managers, but they're not your manager, right? But they don't seem to know the difference, right? So they start thinking like, I need to be a manager. And what they reach for is, in fact, the old definition of management. I'm going to tell people what to do, all that kind of thing, right? And the sad end of this is that at the end of the day, the only reason we had managers was to make people more productive. And in fact, the idea that the more managers we have makes more people productive is absolutely not true. Okay? So one thing is we don't need as many managers, and the more managers you have, the less productive your organization will be.
Mhm. And what is crazy about what you're saying is that if even in organizations like this is strategy consulting firms, they have a huge amount of managers, so they know everything that you should know about productivity and efficiency. Nevertheless, they have. I still see these metrics organizations in several of the consulting groups that I have been working with. Uh, it's still existing.
Yeah, it part of it is driven by in the consulting side, and we work with consultancies as well. Part of that's driven by the fact that the projects that they're doing now are more multidisciplinary and complex in that way, right? So it's sort of the same problem, right? We don't do simple projects anymore, right? There's no just we're just going to do this finance thing. If you're going to do a finance thing, you're going to do a finance thing that's going to impact supply chain. It's going to impact a bunch of systems and maybe the market facing proposition or how we deal with our vendors. And all of a sudden, it's this huge complex project with a lot of matrix management in it. And the I'm going to actually answer your question in just a second here. The
I'm fine, Jack. I
Yeah,
love
yeah, no, no,
listening
but
to
I
you
want to
building
get
the
to that.
momentum. I'm
Yeah,
already.
yeah, yeah. So the problem, one of the biggest problems that happens with so many managers, see, in the old days, I'm the manager of the department and I'm the singular person that can tell someone what to do. Okay, what's the most important thing to work on? When does it need to be done? All that kind of thing. And maybe even if they need it, how to do it. Okay. Now I've got, in the agencies we work in, any given worker has 10 different managers and quasi managers on any day that can tell them what's the most important thing, when should it be done, how you should be doing it, all that kind of thing. And none of them would agree on those topics. So we've got essentially, I've become as a worker, I'm trying to come in and get work done. And the organization is designed to keep me from getting work done and inadvertently designed, but it essentially is if I'm not doing, there's no way I can do what all 10 managers want me to do, right? So I become this negotiant between different managers and different priorities, and people are trying to ask me for favors, and do you have just a minute, which doesn't take just a minute, all those sorts of things. Managers, the existence of so many managers kills productivity. And so the role, the most important thing, I go into this, of course, in a lot of detail in the book. The most important thing managers need to focus on is my interaction with the worker, the person actually doing the work, is it increasing productivity? And in that way, like for the example I just gave, my deciding I want Jeremy to go work on my project right now is actually going to kill productivity if he's not working on it, because he's going to have to stop what he's doing. Maybe he's going to have to go negotiate a different timeline with some other manager. Maybe this will create a bunch of noise and we have to have another meeting where everyone gets together and we kill more productivity with our meeting. The fact that managers don't manage well together means that workers have increasingly decreasing productivity, right? And so the job of the manager is the singular job is to ensure the productivity. And it's not by managing, it's by staying away from the worker, essentially by not creating these conflicts and these confusing interactions. And, most managers, interesting thing, most managerial groups like that, those 8 or 10 managers, one, they don't agree on priority. So how's Jeremy going to work that out, right? Second is, if they're all managers on the same big project, they don't even agree on scope a lot of times. So they're telling Jeremy to do different things in different ways. It's a multi-manager problem that has nothing to do with workers. It's that managers have to get their stuff together in a way that does not impede worker productivity.
Is there a way, in fact, to to create this sense of principles that are going to guide the priorities in terms of productivity? Have you seen it? Have you implemented it or seen it live and working in an organization?
Yeah, and that's, obviously, if I wrote the book, that's what we practice. So the book is what we preach and actually practice too. There's an interesting problem in all of this, right? Which is, at any given day, we don't realize this a lot of times about ourselves. We make thousands of decisions. Okay. And so I, as a manager in the workplace, I'm going to make several hundred decisions, if not more, about should I do this? Should I say this? Should I interrupt Jeremy? All those sorts of things. And the problem is, the majority of those actions, if you take that action, you're going to decrease productivity, right? And so there's one guidance, which is do less managing, do managing only when necessary, right? It's better for you to sit there doing nothing as a manager and let people get work done than it is for you to be intervening with them unnecessarily, right? So there's that first problem. And but there's also just the way you do it. And so what we worked out, and this is one of those things where you realize what you've done after you've done it a bunch of times. After we'd worked with 120, 130, 40 agencies, and other organizations, we realized there are 4 key managerial moments. And if managers behave as a group and individually in those 4 moments, then things go a lot better. It's still not perfect, and I doubt it ever will be. We as humans are not perfect, and the whole problem of the way how many managers we have is, hopefully it gets solved in my lifetime. But these 4 managerial moments are very cool. There's the why. I'll tell you them first. Why, what, go, and grow. So why, I'll come back to why. What is the what we're doing? Scope, right? Okay, that's the what it is that needs to get done, right? I mentioned before, the larger the project, the less likely the managers and stakeholders all agree on the what. Okay. In other words, they will be misaligned on it. And so that if I'm the team working on this and the people sort of managing, supervising, leading this project don't even agree on the scope or don't even understand the scope fully, how am I supposed to get it done? Yeah. So one of the most important things is make sure managers are aligned on scope, deeply aligned. And most people say, yeah, we're aligned, but then we do an exercise where we prove it, right? We actually make them describe the scope and they start arguing with each other, right? Um, and so that's scope. What is scope? Go is when people are executing the work, right? And that's another moment where you want to find a way to help managers avoid interrupting Jeremy, because every time Jeremy gets interrupted, it costs 15 to 20 minutes of productivity, right? And so if there are 5 or 6 managers hovering around Jeremy, the average productivity in a day at in agency land for a worker is about 2.5 hours. Okay. Out of an 8-hour day, 2.5 productive hours out of an 8-hour day that's like insanely crazy. If I turn that agency into a 5-person agency, people are getting like 6 hours a day worth of work. Okay. And the only difference is that there's so many more managers in the 50 or 100-person agency than there were. The work didn't change. Jeremy's still doing the same work, right? So the third moment is grow, okay, which is the role of the manager to help people grow and get, as it sounds, like this is the gardener. I'm going to cultivate the earth around Jeremy and give him great experiences and give him support, sunshine, water, all those things, right? And so those three are just, there are a set of practices that you can do around each of those that actually boost productivity. We've proven it over and over now and the like. I'll pause, but then I'll come back to why, which is actually the really tricky, clever one. So
exactly. So for the time being, we have covered the what, so the scope of work, the go, that means that the manager is helping prepare the land so that all the execution goes smoothly, that there is everything that the team needs, but they are doing it on their own. And then it's about the personal and professional development of the person. Times where the manager needs to intervene, otherwise stay away of the person. That's your message, right?
yeah, and I think
Like it.
yeah, yeah, thank you. I think the thing is that teams are good at asking for help. Okay. And there are all kinds of things that happen. I think maybe we'll talk about what goes wrong here a little bit too, which is I get appointed to being a manager. I had this experience back when I was first a manager. I've been a programmer. I hated managers because I thought they were stupid. Then they offered me a manager job, right? And there's a little irony there, but I also knew that I should be doing what I thought a manager should do, which was I stayed away. I mean, talk to them in the morning and what do you need? And then I'll go do I'll go talk to other managers. Because if I'm talking to them, by the way, they can't interrupt anyone either, which is kind of cool. But I got this idea that maybe being a lazy manager is actually more productive for my teams, and it is. It's amazing. So there's this whole idea that that if I just do less, people get more done. And this is proven by research and also our work that we've done as well, is that having managers in less and this is an agile idea as well, having managers in less contact with the team, okay, actually makes the team more productive. The sprint, right?
Yeah.
So we do a 2-week sprint. And the first day of the sprint, the managers are able to talk to the team about what they're going to do. And then the last day of the sprint, the managers get to see what they did. And what's the rule for the other 8 days? Stay the fuck away from the team. Literally, that's the rule, right? Okay. And those teams have tremendous productivity. And so we stole that idea.
So now is the good moment to talk about the why, our last point.
Yeah. So one of the things that happened I believe it happened from the industrial era, is the workers in the industrial era were mostly in the US, were immigrants, fresh off the boat, no English, little English language skills, largely uneducated, right? Probably farm workers or even worse, migrants that were, in a lot of cases, they were the discards, if you will, the throwaways from other countries and the people who were escaping persecution or whatever. And factories and automation and machines, that was all new to them. They didn't know anything about it, right? And so this idea back then that that they were just going to be animals, right? They couldn't contribute to the discussion of management or anything like that. That's where they got born, is that and why the word manage was probably chosen, right? The difference though is that people do need some support, but they've always been, and this got proven in the 1950s, they've always been incredibly motivated. We humans are the product of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. All of our ancestors were badasses at surviving and figuring things out and the like. It's only today that we can sort of lay back and be bored about stuff or watch Netflix, that kind of thing. But back then it was survival. And those of us that are here now are because our ancestors got wired for survival and solving problems and had a work ethos. And it turns out that people have an amazing work ethos. And if given a chance to care about something, they care about it deeply. And if they actually all feel like they're working together towards something and understanding it together, they get more motivated and their work quality goes up, their productivity goes up, and they're producing better work faster. And punchline, they're happier doing it. Okay, they get more reward from it. Okay, so this is the magic. So how do you unlock this magic? We talked about the other three moments, which are really like, how do we get out of the way of the team, right? And help grow the team. But the why moment is a very, very interesting moment. And that's the old industrial thing, which the worker doesn't need to understand the factory or why we're doing this or why they're punching a hole in this thing. Just do it. Just get it done. Do 200 a day and you get your paycheck, right? It turns out that when you bring the worker into the front of it, the why we're doing this, why it has to be right, how this fits into the bigger picture, why the customer wants it this way, all those sorts of things, again, productivity, quality, and engagement go up, and the quality of the output goes up dramatically. It turns out that if you can engage these people's brains, that they become contributors to how to do things better, how to do things faster. They share lessons learned amongst themselves. And this very important moment, the moment when the manager and leaders, and this is why the leaders get such bad scores, by the way, the leaders actually stop and say, what do you guys want to know about what we're doing and why we're doing it? What do you guys want to know about what the challenge is or what we're really trying to solve with the client? If you think of a town, we have a structured way to do this, but if you think of a town hall meeting, and there's a great example in one of the wonderful books about this. The Japanese do this very well. And there was the CEO, I think it was of Kawasaki Motorcycles, and he was sort of being like a Steve Jobs guy and rejecting every motorcycle revision and that the development teams were doing, and they couldn't figure it out. And he said, come with me. And he took the whole engineering team and they went out to a track, a high-speed motorcycle racetrack. And he had the motorcycles going around the track, and he got on one corner right up next to the track, really close to the motorcycle, and put his hand on the ground. And he said, can you feel that when it goes by? And so everyone's feeling it, right? He says, and can you feel what's wrong with that? And they spent a bunch of time with him, having them get his mindset. Okay. And they could actually understand what they're really striving for. And he was a genius about this stuff, not only the process, but he was a visionary about how a racing motorcycle should sound and feel, and that the vibrations of it tell you how it's running and that kind of thing. And they became great at that. And it was because everyone got aligned on this why moment. Why our motorcycle has to be a certain way and have these certain qualities, and even how to tell when it's happening and not.
What I like about your explanation, I don't know if this is the direction that you want to take it, but so from one side, when you are explaining the management in the previous years, you are talking about more about this sense that motivation was coming from the fact that you were subsidizing your basic survival, which is I need to have food, I need to have like a salary, so I will take it, so I will do whatever it takes. And little by little, standing now with your why, that is going to the direction about this sense of purpose, meaning, which creates something that we have inside of us that we don't do anymore the thing because of the money, because of the salary, but something called is creating an intrinsic motivation, creating something that comes from within and that we do with the heart when we understand why we are doing that. Because everybody aspires to do things not because we have a job, but to do things because it provides a service to the community, because it makes people happier, because, I don't know, because we are making an amazing motorcycle that needs to provide adventure and energy to the user. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
and I think you're nailing it. A lot of people talk about need for inspirational leadership. And I think that a lot of leaders think that means I need to have a vision that's so, whatever. It's very simple. And we had a client, by the way, that did something like that, and they had on their walls, "We are empowered." It felt like a propaganda poster. We are all empowered. And I thought, nobody knows what that. I mean, we know what the idea is, but how do I do that? How do I tell when it's happening and not happening, right? And the bringing the true leadership, inspiring leadership, and he said it very well. True inspiring leadership is about how do I, as a leader, engage hearts and minds in a genuine way, not in I'm not going to give you a Mike Tyson fight speech or something like that, but I'm going to explain to you why our business matters. And I think you got at it as well, which is, thank God for the millennials, I say, okay? The millennials are shaking things up and saying, if you can't answer that question for me, I'm not going to work for you, right? Or if I work for you, I'm just going to plug my time in while I develop my craft brewery idea and get some funding for it and then go do something that matters, right? And so that whole idea that people were so hostage to needing some money, right, has long gone away. And I think our generation, we sort of said, "Hey, money, money, money. Hey, great. That's I'm look how successful I am. Look at my vice president title, all that kind of thing." The newer generations are saying, "Yeah, but where's the meaning? Where's the beef, if you will?" And I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful.
Jack, my guess is that as we have spoken to these four critical moments where the manager should be available and should that the real job of the manager, if you want, and the rest is stay away of the people. How do you teach? How do you teach that to people, to the future generation of managers, considering the fact that, I mean, I'm pretty sure that we would both agree about the fact that the traditional training, like showing slides and doing a one day training, that's bullshit, because this is about practice. It's about creating a behavior that is natural and that is going to be sustainable. It's not about we practice and then if you do it, it's not my problem and I leave. So take Jack the money and let's go
Yeah,
for it.
yeah.
How do you teach
No,
that?
yeah, no, I think that there are a couple things to it. One is the idea, and Henry Mintzberg, who's thought of as the godfather of organizational research. Mintzberg wrote a book in the 90s, I think it was. It's called Managers, Not MBAs. And he made a very good point, is that no one realizes what the A stands for, which is administration, right? Masters in Business Administration. The skills are largely administrative skills. How do you do marketing, right? How do you do accounting, finance, et cetera? There are very few. I went to a top tier MBA school, very few classes, and they're often a corner that actually talk about anything about people interactions and that kind of thing. It's not the focus. I mean, so the question Mintzberg said is, if you wanted to make a great manager, what does the curriculum look like? And it looks like a holistic individual personal development program. And some of the key ideas are, I, as a manager, need to understand me, right? I need to understand who I am. If you think of what the training maybe a leadership coach goes through,
Mm.
that's the sort of thing where I get some self-awareness. I learn to ask questions better. I learned to help people find balance in their lives and understand their issues. And it's very interpersonal, right? And none of that stuff's taught in an MBA program, right? So and your example of the one-day management class, no, nothing you get taught. You may take away one little idea, but the problem is what we know about adult learning is that doesn't work. Okay. I mean, I can go into a whole litany of why it doesn't work because there are like 7 factors that have to be true. None of them are true in that setting. What we've done, because I knew that, and back when we started the company, I said, we're going to try and do a mind shift. And I did the research. I knew some of it already. The only way adult learners and especially managers learn is through a very complex process of having them understand the problem, which is what my book is about, which is what is the problem with management, and then putting them in a real world situation where you coach them into behaving differently. And what we see is that, as you would expect, usually some good percentage of the managers get it and go, oh, that's what managing is, right? But it's got to be with a live project. And this is what we specialize in as we go in and our clients start with, okay, so do I send the project managers to your class? No. No, in fact, you can probably leave them out if you want. Okay. We're going to train the organization and that's going to be, and then they say, oh, great. So what do you need a day? I'm like, no, we probably need a couple of weeks. And they say, okay, well, what's the project you're going to use? I said, I don't know. You need to tell me because we're going to use a real project. It's the only way to learn. When we do the training and sort of transformation really is what it is, behavioral transformation, it has to be on the work that they do. So when we leave, they know how to do the work that they do, right? There's no abstract training or anything like that. So it's a very, very, if you combine what Mintzberg said about the inner journey, right? And what we've proven now with the outer journey, which is you need to repattern organizations. It's a little bit of a challenge, but hey, we're going to win this battle, or we're going to make a difference.
Do you, because if you are helping creative agencies, maybe even companies who are agencies who are working in technology, do you use the agile methodology when you are doing a transformation program?
Well, so for those of the audience, I'll just elaborate a little bit. The agile methodology basically has sort of three big ideas, one of which I mentioned, which is stay the fuck away from the team, right? But the first one is let's all agree on what we're going to do in the near term, right? And there's a method called agile planning. A lot of software agile, which is where it came from, was built around the idea we could never really understand the whole thing, but let's make sure we understand a tiny piece really well, and we will build that. Then we'll look at it and add it to what we built before. So there's sort of this 3-part thing, which actually corresponds. So you've got the why, we do some planning, and then you've got the why and the what, and then we do the go, which is the sprint, and then we got the grow where we reflect on it. So in that way, absolutely, we use agile principles. Okay. For the most part, though, agile planning was really a rarefied technique designed for software development and any application of it. The general application of it in other business actually does more to confuse whether people are aligned than actually get them aligned because it's very high level. And the problem is not a high level problem of getting aligned on why and what. Remember, managers have to get aligned on why and what. And if we keep it at a high level, then they're just all going to agree they understand it, right? And you've got to go into the details. And most projects, you can go into the details, especially the why behind it. And when you start doing that, and we've re-engineered that whole process, when you start doing that, you start getting different results. And so we use a little bit of it, but I mean, we don't use agile as a macro thing for how we do the training. We do more of a learning journey, transformation journey kind of thing.
I like it, Jack. Do you have any clear examples of organizations, of companies who have really started the movement? Because let's call it as it is. This shit about managers having the same job description for the last 30 years, it needs to end now. So do you have any examples of companies that have started the movement of managing less?
Yeah, so this is it's interesting. There are a couple things. Well, section 5 in my book, I go into this a little bit, but it's an area where we actually are doing a lot of consulting right now around sort of roles and titles and organizational design and the like. It's a very, very cool area. We're very contrarian in that way. So people do have a need to be able to see career progression, okay, that I'm getting better and that I have something to aspire to. The problem largely is that we've stuck to the hierarchy. So if I have two people in a department that are both good, one's going to be a winner and the other's going to be a loser, and that's horrible. And so among the many things we need to do is we need to throw out hierarchy and replace it with something that shows progression without elimination, right? Okay. Without that winner take all kind of game. And the other piece to this challenge is that um, we do in having that progression, we go back to an old thing, which I have in the beginning of the book, is we used to know how to do this well, and this was the master apprentice model. Okay. There's the master who knows how to do things well. I use a saddle maker as an example. The master saddle maker's job is not to make saddles, but it's to make great saddle makers, right? And so they're a teacher, a mentor, an explainer, that kind of thing, and a guider, right? And so that's the other managerial job is how do I grow my people and get them doing that? And so you need to change all the org structure around. You got to do something about titles and the like. And in the end of the day, you need a little bit of managing, you need a little bit of hierarchy. I can give you an example. We've got a 40-person agency in Australia. I mentioned them in the book. Dan is the CEO. Um, and he literally, once he got this, he had a couple, he had a layer of, 3 or 4 very senior directors and VPs. They're all gone now, right? They all left because they didn't like it, but they're doing quite well. The organization's doing quite well. But he doesn't have titles at all. And I don't know that that's a solution for everyone, but so the next question you're gonna say is, well, wow, what about when I leave Dan's company? And I mean, how do I get a job somewhere? I had no title. The answer is very simple. Dan says, when you go leave the company, you can put whatever you want as your title here. I don't care. Why do I care if you say you were VP of development and you were just a simple developer? If you get a job as VP of development, good luck to you. You need to live up to it. Okay. That's fine. And so that whole idea of hierarchy in so many ways just goes away when we start relaxing these standards around what we're called and what status means and what even is there a climbing the hierarchy, or is it more I get greater responsibility and that kind of thing. So it's very doable. It takes a mindset, and it takes a CEO that wants to really make a change. That all that structural stuff, the big structural stuff, that's got to be it's a very enlightened leader who takes that kind of thing on.
How would you say that, can we measure that a manager on the sense that you have in your book, which is called Unmanaged, how can we measure the success of a good manager in the context of your book?
Yeah, well, I think I can tell you in the context of any business, typically what happens, and it doesn't work, is managers measure managers. In other words, I'm a manager and I have several managers reporting to me, and I measure them. And I have citations in there about great work that was done for Deloitte Consulting around this idea of how well does that really work? And it turns out there's incredible more than I think it's almost 2/3 of the factors that determine the evaluation have nothing to do with work performance. Okay. They have to do with essentially this sort of biased value thing. In other words, the more someone seems like me, and you can think of it as racist, for example, or sexist, right? The more someone seems like me or shares the same values, the higher I will rate them, right? Which is horrifying. Okay.
Very
So
human.
yeah. So managers build this culture of approval, mutual self-approval in-group thing. If you really want to measure workers, and this was Rensis Likert, the guy who invented the Likert scale, came up with a great way to do it is ask the workers, okay, how well the manager is doing. And that's actually a very excellent way to do it. We do that. We do an intake survey of that kind of thing. And the funny thing is that Likert actually was able to correlate like 26 factors, 26 different questions, like when my manager makes a decision, do they actually consult me and incorporate any thoughts I have into their decision? Right? And the more likely that was true, the higher the performance of the organization and the happier the organization. Okay. And the funny thing is, if you compare worker scores and manager scores, managers always think they do way better at these things as well, right? Okay. But yeah, you can measure managers, and I've got another example in the book where a really cool CEO who taught me a lot. Actually, we worked with them and did some things for them. Ben said all of his managers get evaluated on one criteria, which is they ask all the workers thumbs up or thumbs down. Did that manager help you get the job done, right? And I said I said to Ben, I said, well, what happens when someone gets a thumbs down? He goes, well, they have to talk to me. And he stopped there. I knew he was baiting me, right? And I said, well, what happens when they get a second one? And Ben said, nobody ever gets a second one.
Jack, you made me think about, funny enough, in my corporate life, at one moment, somebody, I don't remember exactly who, had the proposal that managers should be rated by the direct reports. And I remember that they came to me to find a solution. I was working on some area. This is and the fact is that because there was a survey around all the managers about how they rate themselves. So we were using, in order to convince the managers to accept this change of being rated by their direct reports, saying, but you have rated yourself as outperforming. So you shouldn't be scared that your guys are
Oh,
rated.
that's a nice argument. Yeah.
But 80% of them refused.
Yeah. It's funny.
Here, that finally, as you said, for managers, the more you are progressing in the career, in the ladder of the hierarchy, the less aware about yourself you are. So you believe that you're good, but you
Yeah,
also, somebody asks your people, you're going to get.
that's so interesting. I'm gonna use that. Thank you very much. That's really, really interesting, sort of simple case on the thing. One of the things we see in that survey that I was talking about, the survey, the entry survey that we do, is when we get an organization to change and we look at re-survey again, the managers actually score themselves lower than the workers score the managers. So the managers all of a sudden become sort of humble about how good they are or not, right? And the worker's like, no, you do a pretty good job of that, right? I don't know if that's sort of a rebound effect, like you do way better than you did before, so I'll give you some extra points. But it's interesting to see those scores flip-flop as they do a lot.
Exactly. Jack, I'm going to put you on the spot for my last question. And I want to know if you had only one hack that that a manager should aim to master, what would it be? That one thing that they should master.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is what's called asking questions. And it's not a simple topic. Okay. I do have a pretty good treatment of it in the back of the book in section 6, which is the section's called the ingenious manager. And one of the big things, if we think about the why moment and the what moment, especially, and even the go moment, there are a bunch of questions there, like, what do you need to know? What are we missing, right? What do you need from me to be successful today? All those questions open up a dialogue. They're open-ended questions and the like. And even in terms of what do you need to get better in your career? What experiences do you need? The genuine use of questions, what are called humble questions, is really, really powerful. I do mention a book, which I'm going to plug him because he's a famous author. Edgar Schein has a book called Humble Inquiry, which is an amazing book It's a way quicker read than my book, but I do summarize some of the key points in the back of my book. But that's really, and I think one of the other questions, sort of the penultimate question, is really the manager asking the manager themselves the question is, do I really need to do something right now? Okay. Or is this just me feeling like I need to be managerial because I know that if it's that, I'm going to decrease productivity potentially. Right? So it's the understand. Am I going to boost productivity with this action or not? Right. That's I think the ultimate question that managers should ask.
Jack, thank you very much for your time. And I really want to
This has
thank you
been great.
because already the fact that you have come with a kind of a rebel idea of saying, do we need a manager, and how can we develop the skills in order to manage less and be a good person that provides happiness to employees, that create an empowering organization, and finally more efficient, that the one that brings money but with happy people, not with the guys who are all the time. So I definitely uh, recommend this book, Unmanaged, Master the Magic of Creating Empowering Happy Organizations. It's available in Amazon. Second thing is, I really like the fact that you have, as I understood, you have a technical background where you have been using the agile methodology. And suddenly your interest is not anymore about the technology, but it's about the process that can be used in order to make more efficient organizations. And your focus is quite clear. So it's about the places where there is the more mess, agencies that needs to be creative. And in order to be creative, you shouldn't be doing the carrot and stick or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
of the 19th century. Because creative people do not work like with pressure or with I throw you some money, become more creative. That doesn't work, by the way. I have
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
So your company, Agency Agile, is helping these organizations to become more efficient and have more creative people. I love that. Jack, how can people, my audience, reach you out if they want to get in touch with you to get a little bit to know better about your methodology to unmanage organizations? Or how can they reach you out, Jack?
Yeah. So the simplest way, I'm on LinkedIn, Jack Skeels, and go find me there, connect. I love I connect with everyone, who's into the book and the like and that kind of thing, and happy to answer questions. And then also, if you do want to explore us helping you, and we've done, like I said, over 220 organizations now, just contact us on agencyagile.com. Would love to give you a little overview of what we do and talk about what works and doesn't work and all that kind of thing.
Thank you very much, Jack. It was an amazing, inspiring time
Yeah.
today. Thank you, Jack.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful podcast. Very, very fun and great questions. I just want to thank you very much for just being so dialed in on thinking about this stuff. It makes it so much easier on my side. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you, Jack.